Boston didn't always look like the city we know today. If you look at this early view, you realize that Boston was once, effectively, an island. It was a city floating on the water, tethered to the mainland by a single, narrow strip of land. In the 1770s, the Back Bay didn't exist. It was actual water. The landscape feels fragile, exposed, and deeply connected to the sea. This is a city that lived and died by the tide. You can see the density of it, a tight cluster of English brick and church steeples rising out of the cold Atlantic, huddled together against the wind. It looks proud, but small. A lonely outpost of the British Empire that was about to become the center of the world. This image takes us to the Boston Neck, the only way in or out of the city by land. Today, this is the busy Washington Street, but back then, it was a thin lifeline often washed over by high tides. It feels desolate here. You can see the city gates in the distance, guarding the entrance. It reminds us how isolated the colonists actually felt. To enter Boston was a deliberate act. On the left, the gallows stood as a grim warning to travelers. The air here would have smelled of salt marsh and mud. It's a quiet, haunting scene that contradicts the noisy, traffic-filled streets that occupy this space today. Moving into the heart of town, we land at the Long Wharf. This was the engine of the city. In this engraving, the masts of the ships are so thick, they look like a dead forest in winter. This was where the world met America. You can imagine the noise here, the rolling of heavy barrels, the shouting of merchants, the creak of wood against the dock. Spices, tea, gunpowder, and news from London all arrived right here. The buildings line the wharf like a canyon, drawing you straight into the city. It feels industrious and wealthy, but also crowded. There is no wasted space. Every inch of the wharf was used to keep the colony alive. Here stands the old State House, anchoring the intersection of King Street. In the 1770s, this building was the symbol of royal authority. It looks elegant, almost out of place among the wooden shops nearby. The lion and the unicorn of England still stand proudly on the roof, symbols of a loyalty that was rapidly fraying. The street scene below feels surprisingly orderly. Ladies in fine silk, men in wigs, carriages moving slowly. It suggests a city trying to maintain a sense of British civility even as the political temperature began to rise. It's a calm image, but you can feel the weight of the history that happened on these very cobblestones. But that civility didn't last. This scene captures the moment the atmosphere in Boston changed forever. You are looking at the arrival of British troops, the occupation. Suddenly, the city wasn't just a home. It was a garrison. The bright red uniforms cut sharply against the landscape, a constant visual reminder of control. In this view of the Boston Common, you don't see families picnicking. You see tents, rows and rows of military encampments. The city feels occupied, tense. You can sense the unease of the locals watching from the edges. The open green space that was meant for cattle grazing had become a parade ground for the King's army. Down near the waterfront sits Faneuil Hall. They call it the Cradle of Liberty, but in this image, it looks simply like a busy marketplace. This is where the daily life of Boston happened. Fishermen selling the morning's catch, farmers bringing in produce from the countryside, and in the hall above, voices arguing about rights and taxation. The building feels sturdy, grounded. It was a place where the lines between commerce and politics blurred. You can imagine the conversations happening in these shadows. Whispers of boycott and rebellion mixing with the haggling over prices. It's a scene of energy and friction. It is hard for modern eyes to recognize this skyline. This is Beacon Hill before it was cut down to fill the harbor. It was wilder then, steep and rugged, looming over the town. It was named for the beacon pole you can see at the summit, a warning system ready to be lit in case of invasion. The hill feels like a fortress wall, protecting the town below. The houses climb the lower slopes tentatively, leaving the peaks bare. It reminds us that early Boston was still wrestling with the landscape, shaping the earth itself to fit its needs. The city looks vulnerable from this angle, exposed to the sky and the sea. By 1774, the bustle of the wharf had vanished. This image shows the port of Boston under blockade. The British Navy closed the harbor to punish the town for the Tea Party. The scene feels eerily quiet. The ships are docked and empty. Ropes hang slack. The warehouses are closed. You can feel the economic strangulation in the stillness of the water. It's a portrait of a city being squeezed. The sky is drawn flat and grey, reflecting the mood of a population that was out of work and running out of patience. The energy of the earlier scenes is gone, replaced by a heavy, waiting silence. This view of the North End captures the calm before the storm. The Old North Church rises above the wooden rooftops, its steeple sharp against the twilight sky. The streets below are narrow, winding, and dark. There were no street lights then, just the glow of hearth fires and the moon. It looks like a sleeping village, but we know what was coming. We know that eyes were watching this steeple, waiting for a signal. The image carries a sense of anticipation. You can almost hear the footsteps of the night watchman. It captures Boston at the very edge of the precipice, holding its breath, unaware that by morning the world would be at war. These old views remind us that the revolution didn't happen on a stage. It happened in a real city of brick and wood, mud and salt water. It happened in these narrow streets and on these quiet wharves. Boston in the 1770s was a place of deep contrasts, between the safety of the past and the danger of the future. It was a small town grappling with a massive idea. Thank you for taking this walk through the streets of early Boston. If you enjoyed this look back, stay connected. There are many more cities and stories worth revisiting.